welcome back to Thacker Sunday Hangover with me, James Thacker. Today on the podcast is a very good friend of mine, Mr. James Budd. How are you, sir?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm all good. Yeah, I had a very restful, extended Easter break. I was very tactical in terms of how I used my annual leave around this time. So I managed to take 4 days off, and I've only ended up working 3 days in the last couple of weeks. So that's been nice.
Sweet.
I did do a bit of coaching up the rugby club for their Easter camp midweek, so that was very cute, coaching the under 7s and under 8s and getting them playing all those games that we learnt back in the day, Cowboys and Indians and all the stupid little games, just getting them running around. You don't actually need to coach them properly at that age. You just get them running around and get them excited.
Those were the days. Those were the absolute days, mate.
I remember do you remember old Hurdy's football camp back in the day? You were never big on football, but you always
I used to eat the grass.
that was do you know when they gave out awards for the last World Cup day on a Friday as well, and everyone got so heated on that day. It was just like literally life or death. If I don't win the World Cup, I'm gonna. Mate, there were tears every single time without fail.
That's a big memory that I haven't touched in a while. Yeah, completely forgot I used to do football camps.
So yeah, that was the thing though. Back in the day before everyone got addicted to phones and
absolutely
Xboxes. Everyone just loved playing football. Everyone just liked being outdoors.
We were booked onto every possible after-school club, weekend club, summer club, because before phones existed, before we had so many electronical devices to distract us from things, we could do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, outdoors.
Does that say something about our parents' views on us that they booked us on
not wanting us to be at home?
On single camp after school. But yeah, mate, it's good to have you on. So yeah, we'll start with the start. So how do we know each other? We met in year 1, right, at school.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you were there from year 1, but then you weren't there for too long at the college.
No,
because then you decided to abandon me and leave to another school.
I did do that.
But we spent many a time in the back garden playing stupid made up games. I remember that game where we were convinced we created that was going to be an Olympic sport.
Oh, goodness gracious me. We would stand either end of your garden in football goals and kick balls to each other to try and get it in the goal. But from like kick tennis, basically like England play rugby nowadays.
Kick tennis. Yeah, exactly. With like an American football or something. But yeah, those were definitely the days where we just play cricket until the bats were coming out in the garden. I remember that as well. Oh, mate, nostalgia.
Big nostalgia.
Mate, trip down memory lane. This is going to be nice. So before we kick off, so obviously the topic of today's podcast is extremely relevant, and especially with what you've got coming up later on in August, which we will come on to a bit later. But before we go on to that, as this is Thacker's Sunday Hangover, I want to start this as a little bit of a segment where every guest answers this question, which is your favourite item on an English breakfast, especially when you're hungover.
I like that. I like a cheeky little game at the start of a podcast. Okay, my favourite item as part of an English breakfast, especially when I'm hungover, it can only be one thing. Buttery white toast.
Oh.
Because do you want me to explain, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think that needs explaining, because that's a bit of a controversial one. I wasn't expecting that.
It is controversial. First thing that came to mind, cheeky bit of bacon, sausage, but then I thought, like, if I boiled it down to the elements, and if I know you can't, because I'm only picking one, if I had to eat one of them, I wouldn't eat any of the others alone, really. And it's just kind of like, especially on a hangover, some people get upset stomachs or feel a bit queasy, and I could just I could plow through a whole loaf of white bread toasted with loads of butter without fail.
Yeah, you're speaking my language now. I used to eat a hideous amount of Warburton's toasty bread at uni, and consequently put on a hideous amount of weight. But I don't know.
It's a tough question.
Because, yeah, to be fair, I do. Toast is the one. After a hangover, I'm really weird. I can't usually stomach anything hot until the afternoon. So I usually go for like really weird stuff. So I'm probably the worst person to be even asking this question. But for me, I don't know. Toast isn't a bad one. But I'm thinking, can you actually have an English breakfast without toast? Like, is it even on there? I don't know if that's like one of the state. I don't know whether that's like.
I mean, we could get deeper into this because I don't like hash browns. Like,
yeah.
So for me, on an English breakfast has to feature at least bare minimum 2 triangles, and they're sitting underneath the eggs or underneath the bacon. 2 triangles.
Soggy though?
Huh? No, not soggy.
Do you not want the toast coming in one of those like sophisticated
in the middle of the table
racks that you get at the hotels? Mate.
Hotels? That's what Grandpa Bud does.
Oh mate, the middle class is showing. Put it away.
Middle of the table, 2 racks of different coloured toast. All condiments alongside. So when I'm at Grandpa Bud's, I eat like an absolute king because we have a full English, and then I go on to dessert toast, which is jam and marmalade.
Oh mate, that's the way. That's the way. I remember, spending many days around Nan's where it was just literally just chain eating.
Yep.
Like jam on toast, and you coming away like literally pot bellied, and she was very satisfied because she'd made us that much fatter. So, okay, so the first ever guest to answer that question, we're going with toast. Good, I like it. I think I might come up with like a little ranking system based on like your justification. I'll figure it out.
I've set the bar simple.
Yeah, Is that your favourite hangover cure as an English breakfast, or do you do something weird?
My favourite hangover cure is exercise, mate. I do something weird.
Get in the bin. Look at you, Burn. What was it, Burn with Buddy? Mate, I'll get in the bin with that. There's no chance. I tell you what, last year I was in. Was it last year? No, the year before I was in Prague with a couple of mates, and we'd gone very, very hard on the first night, and I woke up. I genuinely felt like I was cooking from the inside. It was atrocious, and it was the most hungover I've ever been. There was a Tesco weirdly right next to the Airbnb we were staying at. I didn't know they had Tesco's in Czech Republic, but apparently they do. And I went down, and the only thing I could stomach until about 12 o'clock was just a yogurt drink, because I was like, I need something cold, and I need like something to just soothe my soul. I had a yogurt drink and a Fanta, which was probably the worst combination.
Very bad combination.
Oh mate, it's terrible. I don't know why I was just like, I need cold. I need like, something that's not water. And the boy, and then on that day we decided in the heat to climb up like the massive hill in Prague that looks out over the whole city.
Absolutely,
and the boys were just like trundling along like happy days, and I am literally crawling up this hill, and I'm like, never again. But there you go. So I don't think I've perfected the hangover cure. I think I want to try charcoal before bed. That's like the next. That's the next one. I've heard that.
You're kidding. That's actually a thing.
Yeah, charcoal and just like a pint of water and then charcoal before bed. Apparently, it does absolute bits. But the only problem is that I lose all kind of sense and rationale like when I'm drunk. So if I actually remember to do that, I will do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will be just more ice lollies and anything cold, to be honest.
Do you kick people off your podcast? Have you ever
do I kick them?
Well, I don't really.
No, I've never had to do that. Everyone's been relatively well behaved so far.
Well,
so,
I mean, I don't get hangovers, so that doesn't really help this whole discussion.
Well, I mean, does that say something about you on nights out where you just don't go hard enough? It's been a while. To be fair, I in recent memory, I don't remember going on a big old night, apart from Ziggy's birthday. We haven't had a night out.
We haven't. No, we really haven't. Well, you can find out in summer.
Well, yeah, let's do it. We're going to do it. That's the next thing we're going to plan.
Generally, I do like to put it back, but I honestly will just have a snack. So I'm quite a conscientious drunk, and I will have a snack and 2 pints of water before I go to sleep.
Deary me, you're just so bloody sensible, aren't you? But,
is conscientious even the right word? Who knows?
Yeah, some long sophisticated word. So how has your lockdown been? I feel like that's probably a question that like we've all answered a million times.
Well, actually, it's a good question. And not one that I have answered, because now we can kind of look back on the bigger picture, I guess, because it's been over a year now. We're almost out of it, so it's probably quite a good question to bring back around. Because mine's been a roller coaster. Like this last one's been the worst by far. Now, I'm sure it has for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely. I think when the first lockdown, as I've spoken about with other guests on the podcast before, I think because the sun was out, we still had the honeymoon phase of like being locked down, not having to go anywhere, not having to commute anymore to work, and we had some of the nicer things about having more family time and all that kind of stuff. But then it very quickly dawned on us. It was like, oh no, like life is not the same.
Away.
Yeah. But at the same time, it was like the comeuppance of like the quizzes, the challenges, like all of this stuff. So we're trying to keep life entertaining for ourselves, but then that very quickly the novelty was lost.
Yes.
And I suppose that's probably what bred what you started at work, right?
What, Burn with Buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, that was lockdown one. After the novelty of those few things boiled away pretty quickly, I got tired of quizzes so fast. And so because I thrive so much off like other humans' energy. Like I love meeting people. I love chatting. Let's be honest, shit. Just nattering with my pals. And so, but for me, it's not the same. I'm loving this right now because we haven't caught up in a while. But for the most part, for chatting, trying to catch up with different groups of mates on Zoom calls and quizzes and all that sort of stuff every week was getting super tiring, surprisingly, because of like how sociable I am as a person. But yeah, so lockdown one, as I'm into my fitness, offered work to do fitness classes, and I went a bit hard, a bit quickly, and offered to do 6 across the 5 days of the working day, alongside the fitness I was doing for myself. So I mean, I ended up losing a shed load of weight in the first lockdown, which was ace.
Yeah, you're looking very Wrigley these days, mate. I mean, not that you weren't before, but like you took it to the next level.
I did take it to the nth degree, which I've always wanted to do at some point. Like I said to myself, one day I'll see my 6-pack. and I finally did, which was good fun. But yeah, so I was doing live workouts for work, and then rolled that over to Instagram. Had a bit of fun, went in waves, had all my mates on at one time, and then after it started dying out, I kind of just dropped it off. Tried to pick up again, lockdown 3, and no one was having much of it because we were all tired of trying to sign into lockdown workouts again for another time. Yeah. It was just that third lockdown pain of like everything coming around again that we've already done, already got over and bored of, trying to bring back to life for one last time, and it just wasn't happening. So
yeah, I think we had to adapt really quickly in that first one. And I think trying to find something to stimulate us, and then you obviously got in your groove. I think it was, would you say it was something that you quickly identified that is something that you needed to do, but also saw an opportunity to help other people out with? Because obviously, and this is something we'll come on to, but activity, other than just your general health, and we all know that when you're healthy, you'll generally feel a lot more positive and life will be a lot easier. But also just that mental stimulation you get from exercise and that togetherness aspect of doing something on Zoom as a group together, knowing that other people are doing it as well. Would you say that was kind of a motivational factor behind doing it?
Absolutely, yeah. I love helping other people, but massively a big part of it was helped me keep structure to my week. I was doing 8 workouts in 5-6 days, but it meant that I knew what I was doing morning before work, lunchtime during work, and then in the evening on Tuesdays and Saturday, like brunch time. And I was doing it with a group of people that were like, we were supporting each other, and it was just a nice little community.
No, that's cool. I remember tuning in for some. I'll be honest, I think I did one. I did tune into others just to see like how you were doing and like people coming on and stuff and the positive comments and stuff. And you did such a good job. No, it was really cool to see. And I think, and then I suppose as you go on, like you say, people became a bit fatigued with, having to constantly, be adapting to another lockdown. And, as the summer months kind of grew old, and then the cold weather started to come in, that's when things get a bit more bleak, because you're like, oh, how long is this going to go on for? It's now getting very cold. I can't go anywhere. And, and I don't know if you got COVID. I got COVID just before Christmas as well. So I had to isolate during my Christmas holiday right up until Christmas Day. So again, that was just sucky, because instead of going out for walks and seeing people around that time, if you can, I can't even remember what the rules were back then, to be honest. But I had to isolate, and then you're kind of thinking, oh bloody hell, like when is this going to be over? So I suppose we all had to kind of roll with the punches a little bit and find different things. That's one thing though. When it comes to like the third lockdown and when things are getting more adverse and more difficult, that's when you kind of try and build your resiliency, or that's when you have to find a different gear in your mental state. Because as much as we're going to talk about mental health and how important it is, and how important it is to look after it and for other people to be mindful of it, it's also really important for you to build up your own resiliency. And there's multiple ways to do that, but there is an element where you kind of got to buckle down a little bit and just grit your teeth and get through that hard bit as well, especially when it comes to things like exercise and when it gets harder. And if you want to keep consistent, because on the podcast we've talked about building sustainable habits, especially around fitness, it is actually just really important to be resilient as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing, like, and I guess we're going to touch on this more and more, but that I had that this afternoon, like thinking about my own mental resilience, because coming on, like, thinking about this podcast and the fact that the situation I'm in, I don't want to jump ahead in your timetable of this podcast, but I had a tough afternoon today. I'm happy to admit that, but it was to do with my mental resilience, and I felt like I was being tested, because I'm trying to settle into a new city, or have been for months, and I'm still not settled because there's no consistency around my weeks and my days here in Liverpool at uni.
Right.
And so it was fully testing my mental resilience, because I got up, I did my workout, I got everything ready, had breakfast, trundled up to the studio, and then on my walk back from the studio after an average day of work with a lot of procrastination, I kind of just felt like, oh, what am I to do now? I still don't have much that I can plan for myself. Nothing's technically really open, and I've done my exercise for the day. Do I do another workout, or do I don't know. I kind of got into a spiral about not having anything to do.
Yeah, I think that's really common, to be honest. I think, this has dawned on me as well, and this is something that I've reflected on massively, is we, as a species, but especially as young people, we want to get busy living. And I think you can view it as that COVID's kind of robbed a year of our life. I tend to kind of lean on the side of glass half full in that respect, because as much as we haven't been able to do lots of things, it's enabled us to focus on other areas and commit more time to things like reading. And I've even joined a book club.
Absolutely, mate.
Like that's something that I never thought I'd do, but around social activism and things like that. So learn way more about that space, commit ourselves to personal progression in our careers, and things like that. It does get to a point though where you do want to get more social. You do want to go out and socialise with friends, like on a Friday night, go to the pub, go bowling, go do something just beyond the Netflix, get home, just relaxing, watching the golf. It is real monotonous. But I think that's something coming out of lockdown I'm going to personally be very mindful of, is that just seize every opportunity you get, rather than finding a way out of certain situations because you're not sure if you really want to make the effort to travel all the way to XYZ place to spend time with people. Grab the opportunity with both hands, because you genuinely don't know how much time we've got, and it can be so easily robbed away from us. I think just this whole period has given me such a deeper appreciation of time. It doesn't necessarily help you in the kind of immediate though, and I appreciate your point of view, because I've definitely been there, and definitely something I'll touch on a bit later in terms of personal experiences with mental health. But it is something that we go through. I mean, the reason why I started this podcast, not only to kind of share some positivity, and just in a pretty bleak time for everyone, and just try and have a bit of fun and bring some, conversations of interest to people. But it's also something for me personally, away from work, away from rugby and fitness, that I can, like a passion project that I can sink my time and my love into, that was going to stimulate me beyond it. And I think finding that is really, really important, so that you have something else to look forward to. So you're not necessarily finding yourself in that situation. You're like, well, I've done my exercise and I've done my uni work today, so what now?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we're kind of, I don't know if you want to jump back to the next step on that, because I've made a few notes, but it's talking about exactly what you touched on, having a passion project, a tribe, and a third space. But that's at the end of the section where we think about how we can improve mental health. But should we touch on our definitions of it first and why everyone's talking about it?
I think so. I mean, I've got a definition of mental health. I think we can probably deliberate that to a little bit. So what the World Health Organization says is that it's a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her abilities and can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to wider community. I'm not sure about that last bit.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful. I think that does massively overcomplicate it, by the way. And that last bit around contribution to his or her community, like, that's very vague for one, but also I wouldn't necessarily say that if you're not making a contribution to wider society, then you've got bad mental health. So I'm not sure about that last bit, but it's essentially, making sure that you're, I suppose, content and also in yourself and I suppose stable and being able to rationalize your own emotions, I guess. And also recognizing when you're having a not so great day, that's okay, but taking the proactive steps to overcome them. That kind of stuff. Would you agree?
Well, so I mean, for me, firstly, everyone's very different. And everyone, just like everyone's physical bodies, everyone's brains and therefore mental health are very different. And it doesn't stay the same day to day, as we'll touch on and as I felt this afternoon. And I'm really glad that you've done this podcast and you picked me to jump on about mental health, because like with LooseHeadz and talking about the stigma attached to mental health problems, or not just problems, even just discussing the fact that we all have mental health. Some people aren't willing to even talk about that as a thing, as a topic of discussion. So for me, I did look up definitions of mental health before jumping on this podcast, but a lot of them were just so wordy and not very correct to me or descriptive to anyone like me. So I think for me, I just think about physical health, think about your body, think about like maybe having an ache in your elbow or getting a cold, or and you'll prioritize improving those and getting them back to a point where you don't feel a creak in your elbow or you don't have a sniffle in your nose. And although a brain is completely different to a human body, it's still part of that biology. And I think for me, mental health exists, and I'm not saying that having bad mental health means you need to fix it straight away like you would a bad elbow, but notice it. I think mental health is the same as physical health, and they're one and the same in a way, because you can't really have one without the other. And I don't know, I think I'm losing my train of thought here, but basically,
I get you. I do get you. I think it's something that should be on a similar level. We think about traditionally, if you've got something wrong with you, you're usually talking about an ache or a pain or something you go to the hospital for, and that's the stuff that we usually only. It's usually very reactionary. In terms of being able to look after our body, but we always neglect the mental health side of things, and I think the concept of mental health has only really become very prevalent in, I'd say, the last 5 years, in terms of being, widely speaking about it, and everyone's having this conversation now. And I think I'm really encouraged to see more of my teammates at rugby and just general friends checking in with each other on a regular basis and asking each other how we're doing and how we're coping with things. I mean, that is a sign that we're becoming much more aware of it as a society. But however, I am very aware that not everyone is accepting of that. Not everyone will be admitting of like having mental health issues, or they'll just kind of try and battle through, shove it to a dark corner of their mind and not really think about it, not try and fight it as much as they can. So I suppose that's the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, to, I suppose, keep the conversation going, bring some really, important talking points to light. I think it is really important to mention, though, I think in certain spheres, especially on social media, I do feel like there's a little bit of mental health fatigue creeping in terms of the chat around it and the talk, because mental health has become very much a buzzword amongst
big buzzword.
A lot of people our age and a lot of organizations. And we see, how easy is it to share a post onto your story? I know I've done it many times around mental health and things like that, but that's where, on social media, that's where the conversation stops. Someone will see that for about 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. They'll digest the information, and then it might mean something to them. But you're not actually having a conversation with other people. You're just spraying information out there. Mental health, be aware of it.
Yeah.
But actually, do people know what it means? I think a lot of people are tired of seeing the words like mental health and it being very unrelatable to them. So I suppose there's that issue as well.
It could be. I mean, seeing a story that you've shared could actually be a trigger for another person, and you don't even know that. Like, let's say, for example, this afternoon, when I was feeling particularly low, I went on Instagram and saw loads of people sharing stories about mental health and how to get out of it, and I could have potentially sat there feeling like I can't get out of this hole because, but I'm looking at this story that you've reposted, and you're suggesting ways to get out of a hole, and I can't do any of them right now. I'm just going to feel worse about myself. So there are definitely times where you're right. Just sharing a story and then the conversation stopping there isn't really helping anyone.
Yeah. So I think that's why I guess it's important to fill in the context around what actually is mental health, why it matters, why people need to take more of account of it, and hopefully in time, in society, it won't be even something that we need. Not necessarily saying that this podcast is going to be, groundbreaking and used as a point of reference in the future for mental health, but hopefully it won't be such a stigma. It won't be something that has to be so actively thought about. It's just something that's part of our everyday lives, and we're just making sure that we're checking in with other people and also checking in with ourselves on a regular basis, and finding really easy ways to monitor how we're feeling, and if we're not feeling great, how actually to deal with that. And I know there's people that are able to help, like psychologists and life coaches and people like that. It's very important to seek that help should you need it. But it's just really important to keep staying on top of, much like you would say, like people go to the gym to make sure that their bodies are in a strong position. People do lots of rehabilitation work around specific joints and ligaments and things just to make sure that they can keep active. It's important to stay on top of mental health in a similar vein, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And also, there's nothing to say that, for example, touching on what you said about like psychologists and psychiatrists, you don't actually necessarily have to wait. Well, the thing is, you shouldn't really wait until you feel like you need it. At that point, some people think that it's too late. It's like waiting for a pec tear to go see the physio.
Yeah.
Kind of like, for me, seeing the brain the same as the body in the gym. Make sure you're warming up. Make sure you're checking in at with the body parts. If you see someone with the wrong form, go and have a chat to them. Say that maybe potentially drop the weight a little bit. There are so many metaphors that you can take from like someone that takes care of their physical well-being and putting that into the conversation with mental well-being.
Yeah, and I think we see obvious kind of consequences should that not happen, and then they're not always that drastic, but they can be quite subtle, and they can lead to some quite negative consequences, which I guess we can come on to.
Yeah.
But I suppose the reason why this has all come about, and there's been such a surge in charities and NGOs, like LooseHeadz, like Mind, like Calm, just to name a few, I think is because we're trying to get away from a lot of the old school ways of treating each other.
The man up and all that jazz.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to men's mental health. Obviously, we're more close to that. So I suppose when we're talking about mental health, it's a lot more relatable for us to talk about the men's side of things because that's all we've experienced. And to be honest, I would love to have more progressive conversations with women around mental health, and I think that's something that I'll definitely line up for the future. I guess we can only speak from our experience, right?
Of course.
But I think we've definitely come from the old school kind of being brought up to an extent, as much as, I think we'll probably be first to admit we've both lived pretty privileged lives up to this point, and very grateful for that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there have been definitely instances in my life and my kind of, being brought up, not necessarily by my parents, but people like coaches, teachers, who have definitely adopted the old school ways of, schooling, where it's kind of man up. They'll give you an absolute bollocking if you get something wrong. I remember one specific rugby coach who would really let you have it at the age of 10 or 11. Should you not?
Was his name Nick Budd?
His name wasn't Nick Budd. Nick Budd was one of the nicest coaches. I think he was the guy that always used to put his arm around me when I was crying about what the other coaches said.
He's a good lad.
But it's about, I suppose, it's moving past that, and just treating each other with more kindness and more thoughtfulness, I guess.
Yes, it's the first thing I thought when you said that is the behind closed doors thing. It's like this kid's coming to rugby training on a Saturday, Sunday, whenever it is, but you just don't know what's happening at school or at home, and there should really be no place for you to fly off the handle as a coach or as anyone, even if you're on a peer level with this person. There's no reason for you to raise your voice or be unkind to a person when you don't know what's going on inside their head.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got more obvious cases, and that's still super prevalent today. And I think maybe a contributor towards the apathy towards mental health, which is things like bullying, especially the comeuppance of online bullying now.
Yeah.
And we've seen really high profile cases of in recent times, like Caroline Flack, where she took her own life as a result of like horrendous just online abuse for a long period of time. You've heard like lots of sports personalities as well also talk about the horrendous abuse that they're coming under all the time and just really struggling under that. And it's just that's what I say. That there's some of the causes behind negative mental health. I'm sure there are lots of others. I think that does lead a lot of people to. So the causation of the reasons that I've just mentioned, they do cause people to be very closed off, and they don't. And I suppose that old school way of thinking, man up, toughen up, it's only banter. That can cause people to be very closed off, because as soon as you start expressing your opinion, or not opinion, but your honest truth around how you're feeling, then back in the day, and even still now in some areas, of society, you're going to be scrutinized in a negative way for actually opening up as to how you're feeling. And then that can lead to people just never opening up and just bottling it all up,
I mean, I still to this day feel like an element of personal weakness when I open up about how I'm feeling, and that's due to how, like, the space that I was brought up in, and the fact that mental health wasn't treated as a thing. No one spoke about it when in the circles that we were swimming in when we were younger. And so to this day, I still feel weak or lesser of a person when I'm opening up to someone about how I'm feeling. And that's something we do need to drop. And it's for men our age, and as you said, we're only talking about our experiences. For men our age, that's one of the biggest problems, is feeling that we're less of a man because we are not having a good day or not understanding why our brain's making us feel like this.
Yeah, and I think that's perpetuated through so many different ways. I mean, the idea of what it is to be a man, I guess, and that stereotypical macho, nothing can beat me, and we idolize the kind of people, especially in the media, who give that vibe that there's nothing ever wrong with them, life's always fantastic. And then if you ever encounter a bad day, you're like, oh no, like, why am I not as great as that person that I'm seeing all the time?
Yeah.
And internalize a load of panic and fear. I suppose on the other side, it'd be good to understand. I mean, what's your perspective on why, as another person, would you think less of a, less of a man, less of anyone for saying, oh, you know what, I'm actually really struggling today. Or if you've tried to give them a bit of banter, them reacting really badly to that. And then you go, oh, well, it was only banter. It was only a bit of joke.
In fact, the complete opposite. If someone opened up to me, opened up completely honesty and showed me like opened their chest essentially, I'd respect them for it. And so it's weird that when I'm doing it myself, I don't give myself that respect and care, and I feel weaker and less of a person when I'm doing it to someone else. But if you were to come to me, or anyone was to come to me and open up to me, I'd respect them fully and give them both ears.
Yeah, I think that's probably because I suppose we're in the generation that's moving with the times. I still think there are some people, especially of our probably parents' generation, where I know for sure that there's people in our parents' generation that would benefit from seeing someone about, their mental health, potentially a psychologist, things that they've gone through. I think it's just it's a lot less straightforward than people make out to be, but also we should all be open to hearing other people whenever they're coming to us about mental health, entering into that conversation with more of an open mind, more compassion and patience, I think. Also displaying those consistent behaviors with your friends, with your family, to let them know that, they can come to you whenever, and, there's never a bad time to talk about these things, because I think that's also something that enters into people's heads that, best not speak to them this day because they're in a really, they don't want to hear it or whatever, but actually, it's really pressing on your mind and you want to open up. And then when you yourself are suffering from poor mental health, or if you need to get something off your chest, having the courage to speak up. I suppose it's about finding the right people as well that you can have these conversations with, I guess.
Yeah.
But just being a lot more open, a lot more, I suppose, trusting, and progressive thinking around those conversations. I'm encouraged with what's happening in our generation. I'm just thinking of the ways that we can try and find different ways for it to resonate in different areas of society.
Yeah.
I think it's happening slowly but surely. But I suppose
slow progress to kind of expedite. It's better than no progress.
Yeah, exactly. Little baby steps.
And we're doing the right things. I'm sure both of us could do more, as could everyone else. But I'm filled with confidence by this conversation and the fact that the title of this podcast will have mental health in it. So that's great. And I think our generation are beginning to do the right things and beginning to open up more, understand more, care for each other more, and question other people's actions towards other humans. And so we're still at the starting point, but we're going in the right direction.
And it's important to go about all of those actions with genuine intentions as well, because something that I see a lot of is a lot of virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Especially on social media now, and it's incredibly difficult to differentiate that, by the way. So we're treading on a little bit of dodgy ground.
Yeah, for sure.
But I definitely do see a lot of kind of jumping on the bandwagon of a particular story or something that's happened in the news or a post because it's gaining a lot of popular attraction. But no one's actually having genuine conversations behind that. No one's actually reaching out to their mates and genuinely living the values of what they're putting out there. And I think that's also really important. So as much as it's important to engage with these topics, it's, progress the conversation, progress it in the right way, and not, I make a parallel to on a rugby pitch. There is absolutely no point in a rugby pitch if you're trying to communicate a message, everyone on the pitch shouting and screaming, making a load of noise, because as much as that might be really intimidating and really off-putting in terms of the opposition, it means diddly squat when it comes to actually achieving the overall objective.
Yeah.
So it's about having the right conversations. It's around, actually going out with the best genuine intentions possible, I think. Would you agree?
Yes.
And then, so some statistics that I think will probably help it resonate. And to be honest, statistics only tell a part of the story, but it's important, I think, because it's quite graphic in people's minds, and it does put it into perspective. These are just some things I looked up before this podcast. So 1 in 4 people will experience mental health problems at some point or in some kind of description each year. So, that's a large percentage of people. And I think, that when you think about, all right, I've got 4 people in my house at the minute. So one of us during the course of this year will encounter a mental health problem.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's a high percentage. And it's making sure that we stay on top of that and making sure that we have an appreciation that, we need to help each other, but also to help yourself along.
Yeah.
1 in 6 people report a common mental health problem, such as anxiety or depression, in any given week in England. So, like a sixth of the population is, suffering. And I think that's probably exacerbated and accentuated by the lockdown, the pandemic. In that, it has been a really difficult time for people, and so it's really prevalent. And I suppose the purpose behind that stat is that it is a more common issue than I think a lot of people realise.
Yeah, it definitely is. And again, that will be brought to the fore by more conversations that people are having. But I can completely say that my mental health has been worsened by the pandemic, and I've definitely, barring a few key moments in my life, some of the worst days I've had with the relationship with my brain have been during lockdowns.
Wow. How, I mean, you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable, but do you want to go into that a bit more, like in terms of how exactly you're feeling, like how it came about?
I think it's just like I think maybe it's because of the amount of inward reflection. I didn't write this down. This wasn't a note coming into this podcast that I thought about I was going to talk about. But I'm happy to be honest and open. I think that is part of this whole conversation. And so for me, the worst days I've had with my head during lockdown have just been days where I've felt a sense of like being lost or not really having much of a purpose and not being able to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so and then for me, I try and find solutions to things pretty much straight away. And when I can't, it gets worse, and I try and find. And so I try again to fix, to like put a plaster over this wound, or to try and patch up this one side, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because I'm like poking and prodding at it. But I couldn't tell you a specific day where I've sat in bed and like just felt lost, but it doesn't happen as much outside of lockdown. But I think, do you know what, it's probably been a good thing in terms of me looking inwards and understanding myself on a deeper level, which is why lockdown has brought this conversation much more to the fore, because people have had more time to talk about themselves, talk to themselves, look at themselves in the mirror and understand what's going through their own heads. And when you don't have an outlet like going to the pub or playing rugby or whatever, and you feel like you haven't even got the energy to pick up the book you're trying to read, that there's not much you can do other than talk about how you're feeling with a mate. But sometimes everyone else is doing something, or it's 10:30 p.m. and most people might not be able to pick up their phone or whatever. So I've never got to a very, very strongly dark place, but I've been in bed at night thinking, I don't feel, even though the day after I'm going for a bike ride and I'm grand again, like happy days, but some random midweek evening I'll just be in the biggest slump in the world, and I won't be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of like really important things there. So you say that there's no you can't recall one point where you thought, oh no, like there's not been one doomsday day where you're thinking, like everything's pointless, like what's my purpose here in life? But it's something that probably gradually over time, like a tide, just kind of comes up on you. And I suppose the more consistently you feel those negative emotions, the stronger then the effects will be.
Yeah.
But then I guess, what did you have a response to that? You know, aside from talking to other people, you know, what I think in times of trial and tribulation, like you say, it does force us to adapt and learn and move, and I suppose learn ourselves a little bit more. So, was there anything that you learned about yourselves where, you know, by doing X, Y, Z activity, it actually helped improve your mental health?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, in moments like that, for me, saving grace would have to be things like meditation, calming. Because when it's 10:30 and you feel like, not that you don't want to wake up in the morning, but you feel like you're on the wrong path, or you haven't even got the energy to do whatever. They don't take a lot of energy or much thought. And so, yeah, read it even when I feel like I can't read because the words are confusing my mind, like making me feel sick. Two things, yeah, meditation and yoga. If it's late in the evening and I don't feel like someone's going to pick up the phone, they're two absolute rocks for me.
Nice. And you felt you've kind of went on a journey to find that, like that. Is that something that you kind of experimented with? You tried a few things and were like, actually, this is kind of making a difference. This is really helping me gain some like mindfulness here.
Yeah. So, well, I think I've toyed with meditation for a few years, but yoga was introduced me by my girlfriend when I was actually not fun enough, but I was in a not the best mental health space. My first 2 weeks in Liverpool, I didn't have a rental. I was staying in Airbnb, and I was super confused about what I was doing. I was bouncing between London and Liverpool every 2 weeks, with like no secure base up here. And one evening, I just didn't know what to do with myself. I'd done my workout. I'd done my work. Like I ticked off, like you tick all the boxes for the day, and you feel like you should sit down after dinner and be like, sweet, happy days. I've smashed that day. I've done everything I wanted to do.
Sure.
I got through everything I wanted to do so quickly because I was hiding away from the fact that I wasn't feeling right. So I did everything like up super early, did my workout, went to the library, did a full day of work, ate all the right things, this, that, and the other, and it got to 7:30, and it was like, oh, I still don't feel good. And so Vas told me about this woman yoga with Adrian. Just gave it a whirl, one of the beginner sessions, and that was the start of a pretty, and it's still going now, a pretty great journey with yoga, because for me it's like an active mindfulness. It's almost an active meditation. It combines, it's like habit stacking, even though you shouldn't be doing it when you're thinking about mindfulness, but
yeah,
stacking being like doing some stretching and meditating in one is epic. So for me, that was the start of a great journey with yoga, and I still do it pretty much daily from that day.
No, that's really cool. I think, and it's really good that you found the thing that works for you. I think that's probably the that's probably the important takeaway, is to, when you're experiencing those low points, when especially here, talking to people, of course, is important, but we spend the majority of our lives in our own company. So It's about experimenting. It's about finding different things that we can do to help improve our mood, whether that be the positive stimulus in our brain through activity, whether that be something like getting out there, seeing something beautiful, via photography, or just being in the presence of other people in like a park and just taking some time to get away from the real heavy stresses of the world, and finding some way to just be a bit more mindful and take a load off. And I think it comes to, people should relish the process of doing that. That's something that I can relate to. So like you, this year has definitely not been without its tribulations for me from a mental perspective, and actually got to a point where I was feeling very, very low, especially around October, November time. I remember it was when Ziggy was out of the country, and I'm still living at home, but work was crazy. I think there's also worries about job security and that kind of thing. I hadn't played rugby since March. It was getting on to 6 months. It's now a year without rugby. Well, we're now back into it through training and things like that, but we haven't played any competitive games, and it was just getting on top of me slowly but surely. I wasn't able to do the things that I love doing. Gym was shut. I didn't have any motivation to go out and do any photography. I didn't have an extra passion aside from rugby. So I had all this pent up frustration. And over time, I started asking my question a lot of, and it was really like to a worrying degree, but I was like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I just felt an overwhelming sense of what's the point. And I'm someone that I'm a bit of a deep thinker, especially when I'm on my own.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's probably good to not be on my own for too long, because I do start to manufacture all these kind of scenarios in my head. But it just got so heavy, and the weight of the world. You're hearing about social issues, environmental issues.
Yeah.
Every day, like doom scrolling, COVID news. It's just been so much bad news after bad news, and I just kept thinking, what's the point? What's the point? And it got to the point, and I want to stress this really clearly before I say this, because I've never been to a point where I wanted to take my own life or suicide or whatever.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I found myself having to block suicide out of my mind in terms of reality. It was the first time that my brain had been suicide's a thing. And I was like, whoa. What is that?
How scary is that, mate?
And I was just like, what the hell? Because I've never been like that. I love life. I love my friends, my family, everything. And I've never been the kind of person that's been, super down and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden I just felt it creeping on me.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I having to, it felt like, and I got to a point where I did have a bit of an emotional day, and I was I just came this outpouring of emotion. Why do I feel like this? When's life going to get better? Blah, blah, blah. So it probably, that is probably when it gets to a point where I should have taken more proactive steps to talk about it with people, to the extent that it was getting to, before I actually got to the point where I was like, fuck, and bawling my eyes out. However, after that, it did provoke lots of, really positive conversations where I was able to be open and honest with people, like my dad, my friends. They talking through stuff and trying to rationalize your feelings and why you're feeling that way was really, really helpful. And then I made a kind of commitment to do more things on a daily basis that were genuinely positive for my health and for my mental well-being. So it's things like putting the phone down when I need a break. So because so there are so many negative things that come from if I didn't need my phone so much for daily activities, I probably would say I don't actually want/need one.
I love the idea of not having a phone.
But I know that will probably sound quite contradictory compared to my Instagram activity and things, because I do so Twitter I is a big conversation, and Instagram is a good place for me to log memories. But actually, going without it would be a really good thing. So it's doing things like that, putting down the phone every once in a while, getting out and getting some fresh air. Thank God that rugby's come back, because I just have needed that so much. But just and then doing things like reading, and slowly but surely, by doing something positive every day and just building that up, talking to more people, being more open with the conversations that I was having. I've attacked 2021 with just a completely fresh mindset, feel super positive, just building, finding things outside of work, like the podcast that I can, find as a passion, something to mentally stimulate myself, taking action and actually giving myself more ownership as to how I'm feeling. It was a really important kind of journey to go on. Now, in the future, I now know what preventative measures to take before I get to that place, because I now kind of see the warning signs that culminate in kind of that explosion of why are we here, what is life, this kind of really deep stuff. And not that you should have to go through that, But yeah, I think it's been a tough time for a lot of people. I'm sure we're not the only people that have felt like that, but no. I suppose it's good to talk about it, because it's like we said, it is a lot more common thing than I think people realise.
Yeah. And yeah, it takes conversations like this for other people to hear, and it's not just in podcast format, but down the pub, on the train, on the bus, on the walk to uni, wherever you are. If you hear someone having conversations about a problem that you've experienced, it's going to lift your mood, even like the tiniest bit. Understanding that there are other people walking this earth on day to day that might look like they're perfectly fine crossing the road, but have been through the exact same things as you, maybe even just the night before.
Yeah, but then that's the key thing, is that they're still here. Like,
yeah,
there is another day tomorrow.
Yeah,
things
the sun rises again.
Exactly, like all these cliches we can we can throw at it, but it is true. Like, things do get better. They get better exponentially when we decide to take action into our own hands, and we're more active with it, and I suppose take more ownership around preventative or prevention of those kind of negative feelings or consequences, or not. And even if it's not prevention, it's accepting that not every day is going to be great, but through doing X, Y, Z, that we've identified that that's good behaviour for me, or that's a good activity to help my mood, then we can lift it slowly but surely. It doesn't always need to be a rapid turnaround, but things do get better. So yeah, big old reason as well why, obviously, like, it was good that it popped up and it coincided with you coming on the podcast, was obviously the latest announcement. So you're working with LooseHeadz, and you're about to embark on an incredible challenge. I'm definitely not envious of you, because my bum would be in complete tatters from the amount of cycling that I think you're about to do. But do you want to explain the challenge, like what you're doing, and then how that kind of came about?
Yeah. I love talking about the crazy stuff I do in my life.
You do it, man.
Yeah. So, LooseHeadz, lockdown 1. I became part of the LooseHeadz Academy. Long story short, about my relationship with LooseHeadz, became part of the LooseHeadz Academy. Kind of just signed up, wrote a bit about my story, what I was doing in the next few years, and how I'd like to help LooseHeadz as a charity. They admitted me into the academy, so started building a relationship with the charity, and then lockdown 2, just went out for a little ride. I've always enjoyed fitness. I've always enjoyed challenging myself. It's the space when I'm at most at one with myself is on a run, on the bike, just doing something you versus you out in the world. Like, it's the best. And so I was just out I went, I think, probably 25 kilometers on my single speed bike, just a little pedal around Hertfordshire when I was back staying at my mum's over Christmas. And I thought, do you know what? I've always wanted to do Land's End to John O'Groats, and I don't know, maybe I could just do something crazy and do it on this bike. And then from that ride, it exploded. I called my mate Will, and I had to call Will first because I needed to call someone that would bounce back the amount of energy I had about this challenge straight to me and validate it for me. I couldn't tell my family first, because they'd be like, well, that's stupid. So I had to call someone that I knew was going to be like, yes, mate, absolutely. So I called my mate Will.
Someone that wasn't going to talk you out of it.
Yeah,
you're like,
for sure.
I need someone that's going to sell me my own dream.
I talked myself into it for that whole ride.
Yeah.
And it was a good idea when I called him, and it had to be someone that it was going to be a good idea for as well. So Will, thanks for that. And then from there, that's where the journey began. I think a week after that, after going out on a couple other rides, I was just testing the water to see if I could actually maybe train for this. Contacted LooseHeadz, who I fortunately had a small relationship with already by then, and they were more than keen. So from December was when the seeds were properly planted. And so long story short, I am cycling the length of the UK, so Land's End to John O'Groats, which will probably end up being around 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers, on a single speed bike for LooseHeadz, a charity that we've talked about, but basically a a mental health charity that focuses on like bringing new and innovative ways to advance like the dialogue around mental health, amongst other things like supporting other charities and having a text service and all that sort of stuff, partnered with Team Mental Health. But yeah, so a great mental health and sports charity that I've been affiliated with in a part for a year. Some great guys at the top, and I just kind of want to use. It sounds I need to think of a better way to phrase this, but I like the idea of using my body to help other people, but I need to come up with a better wording for that. using my legs and absolutely killing myself on the bike for 2 weeks to raise some money for a great charity.
Yeah, I think, mate, it's an absolutely more than worthy cause, and I think you're definitely going to be tested in body and in mind on that whole trip. So yeah. I think it's definitely an appropriate challenge for the kind of cause that you're doing it for. It's awesome, mate. I'm big admiration for you. What's the preparation going to look like from now? It's was it August the 7th?
So no, the first. I want to start on Tuesday, the 24th of August. So I've given myself as much time as possible to train because of the ridiculousness of the challenge. And the training has already started. This week is a 210 kilometer week on the bike, spread over 3 days, spaced by a day. I'm just kind of working through my training program that I've written in my head for myself. I'm 50% wing it, 50% plan. So I don't want to plan it all out, because where's the fun in that? But I don't want to chaotic. I don't want to be exactly. I don't want to completely wing it. So I've kind of already roughly planned the route. I know it's going to be an average of 135 kilometers a day, and I know roughly where I want to be in the weeks running up to that. And I know I can get, in terms of training, I know I can get to where I want to be in training between now and then. It's just then doing the actual challenge, running on adrenaline, fueling properly, having support is going to be the biggest thing. Having people out on the ride with me, and it's one of the reasons I decided to do it was because of like the metaphor for mental health and the journey you go through day to day. There'll be tough days where I'll be constantly undulating hills, and I'll need every little bit of support alongside me as possible to get up those hills on a single speed bike. And then there'll be flat days in the sun where, on my 85 kilometer rest day, so to speak, where it will be a breeze. I'll be halfway through the challenge. I'll have my dad next to me, and it will feel like nothing can stop me. So kind of like using that as a metaphor for the mental health challenges we go through day to day. And one thing that I just definitely know I'm going to need is just support, mates on bikes, even people I don't know that I can connect with on the route, just people alongside me on bikes, or even just on foot walking up the hills next to me, because they're going to be the toughest days.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, mate. I'm sure there'll be lots of people out there holding flags and waving you on. Have you got any areas of the country that you're slightly you've got slight reservations over? Because
the first 2 days,
there are a few hills in the way.
The first 2 days and the last 2 days are the ones that I'm most worried about, and the ones other people are most worried about for me. When I told other people about this challenge, people, especially people that have done it, for example, like Will Googe, he ran it, which is absolutely mental, and a dude that I look up to. But yeah, so he ran it, and he did it the other direction. And there was a hill on maybe his third day that would be on my either last day or penultimate day in Scotland, which is, apparently it has sand traps for lorries if their brakes fail. So kind of like, I think the Highlands and right at the bottom in Cornwall and Devon. So the first 2 days and the last 2 days, the Savage Hills there, but particular parts of the country I'm worried about. In the middle, it's not as bad. Like, I've cycled a lot around the Liverpool area, so going to be stretching out to Manchester soon, but the rides I've already planned. This northwest of England is surprisingly flat.
Okay.
So there's a few days in the Midlands and the northwest, which I'm not too worried about. But second I cross the border into Scotland, it gets pretty hilly again.
Oh yes. I mean, last year I did the North Coast 500 in a car, and I found that challenging. So enjoy that, buddy. But mate, that's really cool. What are you looking forward to the most?
What am I looking forward to the most? Whew. The finish.
Finish the end.
Because just the feeling that I'm going to experience, because the biggest challenge I've done to date, this is a big jump between the two, but I ran Amsterdam Marathon.
Yeah.
In 4 hours and 3 seconds, which is so gutting because I wanted to get sub 4, but I burst into tears when I crossed that finish line, and the feeling was amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, amazing, mate. Well, I struggle to relate because I think the furthest distance I've travelled on a bike is 45 miles when I did Palace to Palace 2 years ago. And I think during that day I suffered 3 punctures. I think half of that was due to just my inexperience of riding, and half of that was due to the weight I was carrying at the time. So, but that was real difficult. I can't even imagine traveling the amount of distance that you're going to. But mate, I'm in massive awe and admiration of you. So that's awesome. Where can people donate to you if they want to donate?
justgiving.com/crowdfunding/LooseHeadz James Budd. You should be able to find it. It's on my Instagram, in my bio. #follow me and all that jazz.
I'll put all the links. I'll put it all in the description. But
it's in my bio. Yeah. It's on LooseHeadz' account as well, and it's on Just Giving. So yeah, please, anything, pint of Guinness, whatever you can support, it would be really grateful.
Brilliant, great stuff. So I suppose just before we wrap up, I think just to kind of summarise everything that we talked about, if we can, it's really important in this day and age and going forward to really look after our mental health. I think to be mindful of others' mental health, be open to the conversation, take some time out to speak to your friends, offer yourself out. I think regular check-ins help. And depending on how you run your relationships with your friends, with your family, people maybe don't necessarily check in that much, but when you do, make sure that we're having, really purposeful and open conversations with people around how they're doing. One thing that I really like that LooseHeadz do is they say, ask how someone is, and then
how are you really,
ask, mate? And how are they really? And I really like that because it's very, very true. And I've actually done that with some of the guys from rugby, and you actually have conversations that have led to, I'm struggling with this bit of life at the moment. And you talk through it.
And it's that second ask that's so important.
Yeah, and you get them talking, and sportsmen are notoriously, from my experience, notoriously difficult to get open up because, especially in rugby, that is like a macho arena where people don't want to show any weakness. But thankfully the stigma's changing or being abolished now, and no, that's really cool. So asking how someone is, asking how they are really, arranging to do things together, and obviously that's going to be a lot more applicable. We're going to be able to do that a lot more going forward as lockdown restrictions are easing, but even if it's going out for something like a walk. And then in the future, this is something that is quite personal to me, but I'm going to try and avoid nights out where I'm really heavy drinking, because I think especially in this country, it's so normalised that we just drink ourselves into oblivion, and we forget a lot of the time that drinking or alcohol is a depressant, and it's notorious for making us feel that much worse, especially on a hangover or whatever. Now, I love a tipple, and it doesn't mean that I'm never going to have a big drinking session ever again, but it's maybe like minimising the amount of times we do that. And actually just having a chill one, having these conversations over a pint and turning it into a good night, rather than drinking yourselves into oblivion, trying to forget what's happened, or any of that kind of stuff. So that's another one. And then probably finally, I don't know whether, James, you want to add any after this, but I think just be kind first in any interaction that you have. I think nowadays we've got such a "I want it now" culture. Like everyone's got such a short fuse. Road rage is very apparent. We've got very little patience for other people, especially when everyone's very tetchy now in social situations, because we're probably not used to it after a little while of being out of like communities and things like that. So everyone's super tetchy, probably not giving each other enough leeway. Just think, be kind. You know, your first thing in your head should be like, am I being kind to this person? That's something that I can definitely be better on. I think everyone has room for improvements to some degree, because I think we can all just be kinder to people, especially in the UK, where we've always gone with the approach of stiff upper lip and get on with it, chap. So I think be kind. And yeah, aside from that, buddy, is there anything else to say?
Oh, buddy, I've missed that nickname. I think be kind is quite a nice way to end, and then it leaves the point in people's head, because it's not hard. I don't know why. Sometimes we think it's hard, but to step back, take a breath, and just be kind, because it's really not that difficult to be a nice person to your fellow man, woman. And so just do it. Think about other people.
Absolutely, Mondo. And I suppose it's an important disclaimer that James and I are not mental health professionals. We only speak from our experience and how we understand it. Obviously, I think we've both done some reading and I've been active in this topic, but we're not professionals from any stretch of the imagination. So should you ever be struggling to the point where you think you need to seek professional guidance, absolutely do so. Don't take for what we've said for gospel either, but hopefully that's been of interest to people. Hopefully it's helped sharing our personal experiences. I definitely felt it was therapeutic talking about it to you, mate. So Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being open and honest and sharing your experiences. And Matt, I really enjoyed that podcast. That was a really good one for me. So hopefully you enjoyed it too.
I loved it, mate. Thank you very much for having me on, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Oh, mate, 100%. You'll we'll have to. I'll buy a bike and then I'll cycle to you. We'll cycle halfway, or we'll go on a bike ride together, or we could just go for a pint. It's a lot easier for both of us. But thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate you. It's really cool that actually the amount of countries that this podcast has reached now. I was really surprised looking at the diagnosis the other day. We're reaching all corners of the globe, so that's really cool.
Congrats, mate. Congrats.
Thanks, buddy. Really enjoying it. We'll keep these going. I'll hopefully be back for a midweek remedy next week. Have a great week, everybody. Take it easy. Look after yourselves and be kind.